I scrubbed their toilets for a decade. I was invisible, just the help. But when the old woman died and her family gathered like vultures around her fortune, the lawyer opened the will and said 5 words that shattered everything. To my daughter, Maddie. That's me. I'm Maddie. And I'm about to tell you how I went from their maid to their worst nightmare. This is my story. Before I take you back to where this all began, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your country in the comments below. And if you're ready for a story about secrets, betrayal, and the truth finally coming to light, please hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this ends. Now, let me tell you everything. My name is Maddie, and for 10 years, I was a ghost. Not the scary kind that haunts old houses, though God knows the Hartwell mansion had enough darkness in its walls to birth 1,000 spirits. No, I was the other kind of ghost, the kind that scrubs your floors, washes your sheets, and picks up after you while you look right through them like they don't exist. I was invisible. Every morning at 6 a.m., I'd arrive at the towering iron gates of the Hartwell estate, punch in the code 2471, never changed in all those years, and make my way up the cobblestone driveway that wound through perfectly manicured gardens I wasn't allowed to walk through. Only the path, always the path. That was the rule. The mansion itself was something out of a movie. 3 stories of old money and older secrets, with its gray stone facade, towering columns, and windows that seemed to watch you like judgmental eyes. 32 rooms. I knew because I cleaned every single one of them. Marble floors that showed every footprint, crystal chandeliers that took 2 hours each to dust, and enough antique furniture to fill a museum. It should have been beautiful, but beauty has a way of turning ugly when you're the one on your hands and knees scrubbing behind the toilets. The Hartwell family consisted of 3 people, though it felt like 30 with the amount of mess they created. Richard Hartwell, the son, 52 years old, balding with a round belly that stretched his expensive suits and a mouth that never smiled unless he was counting money. He worked in finance, which apparently meant sitting in his study, yelling into a phone about stocks and margins while I vacuumed around his feet without him acknowledging I existed. To him, I was furniture. Less than furniture, actually. At least he noticed when a chair was out of place. Then there was Vanessa, his wife, 45 going on 25 if you believe the amount of plastic surgery and Botox she'd had done. She wore designer everything. Designer clothes, designer shoes, designer sunglasses she wore indoors because she thought it made her look like a celebrity. Her favorite hobby was pointing out everything I did wrong. Maddie, these windows have streaks. Maddie, you missed a spot on the banister. Maddie, did you use the cheap detergent again? I can smell it. Never a please, never a thank you, just commands delivered in that nasally voice while she scrolled through her phone, shopping for more things she didn't need. Their daughter, Lily, was 19 and somehow even worse. She'd grown up watching her parents treat me like dirt, so naturally, she thought that was how the world worked. She'd leave her clothes scattered across her bedroom floor like landmines, makeup smeared on the bathroom counters, and wet towels in piles that bred mildew. Once, she knocked an entire bottle of nail polish onto the white carpet just to watch me clean it up. Oops, she'd said, not even looking up from her phone. Better get that before it stains. It stained anyway. I scrubbed for 3 hours. She never apologized. This was my life. 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., Monday through Saturday, sometimes Sundays when they had parties. 12 hours of bending, scrubbing, lifting, organizing, and erasing any trace that they were actual human beings who created mess and chaos. I made barely above minimum wage. No benefits, no sick days. When I had the flu 2 years ago and missed 3 days, Vanessa docked my pay and gave me a lecture about reliability. You might be wondering why I stayed.
Why I didn't quit and find something, anything better. The truth, I couldn't leave. Not because I needed the money, though I did. Not because jobs were scarce, though they were. I couldn't leave because of her. Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell, the matriarch, Richard's mother. She lived on the third floor in a suite of rooms that overlooked the gardens, 87 years old, with silver hair always pulled back in an elegant bun, sharp blue eyes that missed nothing, and a presence that commanded respect even from her spoiled son. She was different from the rest of them. She saw me. "Good morning, Maddie," she'd say every single day when I brought her breakfast tray. Not a dismissive grunt, not silence, an actual greeting, with my actual name, like I was a human being. She'd ask me about my day, my life, my dreams. She remembered details, that I liked mystery novels, that I was allergic to lilies, ironic given her granddaughter's name, and that I'd once mentioned wanting to learn piano. One Christmas, while Richard gave me nothing and Vanessa gave me a lecture about taking too many bathroom breaks, Mrs. Hartwell gave me a leather-bound journal and a fountain pen. "For your thoughts," she'd said, pressing them into my hands. "Everyone deserves a place to put their dreams, dear." I cried in the storage closet for 20 minutes after that. Over the years, our relationship had become something I couldn't quite name. She'd request that I, specifically, clean her rooms. We'd talk while I dusted and organized. She'd tell me stories about her youth, about traveling through Europe, about the husband she'd lost 30 years ago. And sometimes she'd look at me with such sadness in her eyes that it made my chest ache. "You remind me of someone," she'd said once, touching my cheek with her papery soft hand. "Who?" I asked. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Someone I lost a long time ago." I never pressed. We all have ghosts. But 6 months ago, everything changed. Mrs. Hartwell got sick. It started small. She'd forget words mid-sentence or need help standing from her chair. Then came the diagnosis: stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave her 6 months at most. Richard's response? He started cataloging the house. I'd catch him in various rooms with a clipboard, photographing antiques, researching values online. Vanessa ordered new furniture for after the remodel. Lily started planning how she'd redecorate once Grandma's old stuff was gone. They were planning her estate sale before she was even dead. I was the one who held Mrs. Hartwell's hand through the bad nights, who read to her when she couldn't sleep, who sat beside her bed when the pain was too much and the morphine hadn't kicked in yet. "Maddie," she whispered one night, gripping my hand with surprising strength, "I need to tell you something about why you're really here." My heart hammered. "What do you mean?" She looked toward the door, making sure we were alone, then back at me with those piercing blue eyes that suddenly seemed so familiar, though I couldn't place why. "I've made terrible mistakes in my life, my dear girl. Terrible, unforgivable mistakes. But I'm going to make one thing right before I go. I promise you that." "Mrs. Hartwell, I don't." "Promise me you'll forgive me when you know the truth. Promise me, Maddie." The way she said my name, like it was sacred, like it meant something, sent shivers down my spine. "I promise," I whispered, though I didn't understand what I was promising. She smiled then, a real smile, and a single tear rolled down her weathered cheek. "My daughter," she breathed. "My beautiful daughter." I thought she was confused from the medication, delirious. She'd never had a daughter. Everyone knew Richard was her only child. But now, looking back, I realize that was the moment everything began to unravel. That was 3 weeks ago. Today, we buried Eleanor Hartwell. And today, The weeks leading up to Mrs. Hartwell's death were the strangest of my life. After that night when she called me her daughter, which I'd convinced myself was just the morphine talking, things began to shift in ways I couldn't explain. Mrs. Hartwell started asking me to do odd things, personal things. "Maddie, dear, could you bring me the box from the top shelf of my closet, the blue one in the back? Mady, there's a key taped under the third drawer of my dresser. Use it to open the trunk by the window. Maddie, I need you to go to my safe. The combination is your birthday. Write it down. 04-17-1995. That last one stopped me cold. How do you know my birthday? She'd smiled mysteriously. I know more than you think, sweetheart. My birthday. She'd programmed her safe with my birthday, the same safe that Richard had been trying to access for years, convinced it held her most valuable jewelry and documents. Inside, there were no diamonds or stock certificates. Instead, I found photographs. Dozens of them. The first one I pulled out made my hands shake. It was a young woman, maybe 25, with dark curly hair and green eyes, standing in front of this very mansion. She was beautiful, glowing, and clearly pregnant. Very pregnant. She looked like me. Not similar, not kind of like me. She looked exactly like me. "That's me," Mrs. Hartwell said softly from her bed. 30 years ago. I was 28 weeks pregnant when that photo was taken. I turned to stare at her. But Richard was 10 years old when that was taken. She took a labored breath. "Richard is my son from my marriage to Thomas Hartwell. We married when I was 19. Very proper, very acceptable to both our families. I don't understand. Keep looking." My hands trembled as I sifted through more photographs. The pregnant woman, young Mrs. Hartwell, in various stages of pregnancy, then photos of a hospital band, a birth certificate, but the baby's name was blacked out with thick marker, and then a tiny infant, maybe a day old, with a distinctive strawberry birthmark on her left shoulder blade. The same birthmark I have. The photograph slipped from my hands and fluttered to the floor. Her name was Madison Eleanor Hartwell, born April 17th, 1995, at 3:42 a.m., 7 pounds, 3 ounces. She had her father's eyes and my hair, and a little strawberry birthmark that looked like a heart. I couldn't breathe. The room tilted. Thomas had been dead for 5 years when I got pregnant. I'd fallen in love with someone inappropriate, someone my family would never accept. Jonathan was an artist, brilliant, passionate, poor as dirt. We met at a gallery opening. For 1 year, I felt alive for the first time since Thomas died. She paused, gathering strength. When I discovered I was pregnant, I was terrified and thrilled all at once. But my family, God, my family, the Hartwells are old money, Maddie. Reputation is everything. A widow having an affair was scandalous enough, but pregnant out of wedlock at 36? Richard was already being bullied at his private school about his loose mother. My father-in-law threatened to cut me off entirely, take Richard away, destroy me socially. "So what did you do?" I asked, though part of me already knew, part of me had always known. I hid the pregnancy, went to a wellness retreat in Switzerland, had the baby in a private hospital, and then I gave her up for adoption. I signed papers that sealed the records. I was told she'd go to a good family, have a wonderful life, and I would never know where she ended up. It was a closed adoption, permanent, final. The room was spinning. Why are you telling me this? Mrs. Hartwell looked at me with those blue eyes, the same eyes I saw in the mirror every day, I realized with a jolt, and smiled sadly. Because I spent 30 years searching for her. I hired private investigators, I broke laws, I bribed officials. It took me 28 years, but I finally found the adoption records. She reached out her frail hand to me. The couple who adopted my daughter kept her for 6 months. Then they got divorced, and neither wanted to deal with a baby. She went into foster care, bounced around New Jersey and New York, 17 different homes before she aged out of the system at 18. That was my life, exactly my life. 17 homes, some good, most terrible, all temporary. She worked minimum wage jobs, put herself through community college online, and spent years searching for her birth mother through DNA websites and adoption registries. She never gave up hope of finding her family. Tears were pouring down my face now. How? When did you... 2 years ago, your DNA profile popped up on a genealogy site I'd been monitoring. We were a match. I hired an investigator to find you. You were working at a diner in Newark, living in a basement apartment, struggling to pay rent. You just posted on an adoption forum that you were looking for your birth mother. You'd included your birthmark as an identifying feature. Mrs. Hartwell pulled back her sleeve, showing me her own arm. There, faded with age, but unmistakable, was the same strawberry birthmark in the exact same spot. Hereditary, she whispered. My mother had it too. The moment I saw yours in the photographs the investigator took, I knew you were my Madison. Then why? I gasped, anger suddenly flooding through the shock. Why did you hire me as your maid? Why did you make me scrub your toilets and take abuse from your son and his horrible family? Why didn't you just tell me? Because I was a coward, she cried out, her body shaking with sobs. I convinced myself I was doing it to get to know you first, to make sure you were safe, to ease you into the truth. But really, I was just terrified. Terrified you'd hate me for abandoning you. Terrified Richard would contest any claim you made. Terrified of destroying what little relationship we had by revealing the truth. She grabbed my hand with both of hers, clinging desperately. So I told myself that having you close was enough. Seeing you every day, hearing about your life, making sure you were okay. I convinced myself that was better than nothing. And every day I planned to tell you. Every single day. But I kept chickening out. You let them treat me like garbage, I said, my voice hollow. Your own daughter? I know, and I hate myself for it. I should have told you immediately. I should have claimed you as my daughter in front of everyone and damned the consequences. But I was weak, Maddie. I chose the easy path, keeping the peace, maintaining appearances, protecting my comfortable life. Just like I did 30 years ago, when I gave you away. She was sobbing openly now, looking smaller and frailer than I'd ever seen her. I don't deserve your forgiveness, I know that. But I'm going to do one thing right before I die. I've already done it, actually. My lawyer has very specific instructions. Richard and Vanessa and Lily. They're going to learn exactly who you are, and they're going to learn what it costs to treat people as less than human. What did you do? I whispered. She smiled then, fierce and fierce despite her weakness. I rewrote my will 3 months ago. Every word, every clause, every penny allocated with absolute clarity. Richard thinks he's inheriting everything. He has no idea what's coming. Mrs. Hartwell, call me Eleanor, or Mom if you can ever find it in your heart, but not Mrs. Hartwell. Never that. Not anymore. I sat there holding my mother's hand, as the truth of my entire existence rearranged itself like a kaleidoscope. There's more, Eleanor said, pulling out a faded envelope from under her pillow. Letters. I wrote you one every year on your birthday. 29 letters I could never send. They're yours now. And there's information about your father, Jonathan. He never knew about you. I never told him. That's another regret I'll die with. Over the next 2 weeks, as Eleanor's body failed and the cancer ate away at her strength, we talked. Really talked. She told me everything. About her life, her regrets, her love for me that she'd buried under duty and fear. I learned that every gift she'd given me over the years, the journal, the books, the small bonuses she'd sneak into my pay, were her way of trying to provide for me without raising suspicion. I learned that she'd had the third-floor guest room redecorated in my favorite colors, planning to eventually reveal the truth and invite me to live there as her daughter. I learned that she'd established a trust fund in my name years ago that grew larger each month. And I learned that despite everything, the abandonment, the lies, the wasted years, I loved her. This complicated, flawed, desperate woman was my mother, and I loved her. 3 weeks after our first real conversation as mother and daughter,
The day of Eleanor Hartwell's funeral was cold and gray, the kind of October morning where the sky looks like it's holding its breath. I arrived at the mansion at 5 a.m., 2 hours earlier than usual, not because anyone asked me to. God knows Richard hadn't even bothered to tell me about the service details, but because I knew there would be work to do. A house full of mourners meant extra cleaning, extra cooking, extra everything. And because it gave me time alone before the vultures descended. I stood in Eleanor's empty bedroom, the morning light filtering through the curtains she'd loved, and let myself cry. Really cry. For the mother I'd just found and lost in the span of 3 weeks. For the 30 years we'd never get back. For every moment I'd spent scrubbing floors beneath her roof, not knowing I was home. Pull yourself together, Maddie, I whispered to my reflection in Eleanor's vanity mirror, the same mirror where she used to sit while I brushed her hair in those final weeks, both of us pretending everything was normal, even as the truth hung between us like a shared secret. I splashed cold water on my face, reapplied my minimal makeup, and went downstairs to prepare. By 8 a.m., the house was immaculate. By 9, I'd set up the catering in the dining room, elegant finger foods and expensive wine that Richard had ordered in bulk, probably planning to keep the leftovers. By 10, I'd changed into my only black dress, a simple, cheap thing from Target that Vanessa had once sneered at during a Christmas party. The funeral itself was at 11 at the Presbyterian church downtown, the same church where Eleanor had married Thomas Hartwell 60 years ago. I wasn't invited, obviously. The help doesn't attend family funerals. But Eleanor had left an envelope with the house manager specifically for me. Inside was a handwritten note. Maddie, my darling girl, I've arranged for you to have a seat at the funeral. Back row, left side. They can't stop you from attending a public service. Afterward, you are required to be present for the will reading at 2 p.m. in the mansion library. My lawyer, James Chen, has strict instructions. Don't let Richard intimidate you. You belong there. You belong everywhere. Love always. Mom. That word shattered me all over again. I clutched the note to my chest and made a decision. I was going to that funeral. Not in the back row. In the front section, where family sat. If Eleanor wanted me there, I was going to honor her properly. The church was packed. Eleanor had been a fixture of the community. Charity boards, hospital fundraisers, arts council, people genuinely mourned her. Then there were the Hartwells. Richard sat in the front pew wearing an expensive black suit and an expression of practiced grief that didn't reach his eyes. Every few minutes, he'd check his Rolex or whisper something to Vanessa, who dabbed at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief, her fresh manicure glinting in the church light. Lily sat beside them, scrolling through her phone, not even pretending to care. I slid into the third row, right side, close enough to be visible but far enough not to cause immediate confrontation. Richard saw me almost immediately. His eyes narrowed with confusion, then irritation. He leaned over to Vanessa and whispered something. She turned, spotted me, and her face contorted with indignation. Good. Let them be uncomfortable. Eleanor would have loved this. The service was beautiful, exactly as Eleanor had planned, according to the program. Her favorite hymns, readings from poets she loved, a slideshow of her life that made me ache because I wasn't in any of those photos. I should have been.
When it ended, I made sure to walk directly past the family on my way out. "Maddie," Richard hissed, grabbing my arm. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Paying respects to Eleanor," I said calmly, pulling my arm free. "She invited me." "My mother did no such thing." "Actually, she did, in writing. And I'm required to attend the will reading at 2 o'clock in the mansion library. Mother's orders, not mine." Vanessa's mouth dropped open. "Absolutely not. Richard, you cannot allow the maid to—" "I'll be there at 2, I said firmly, walking away before they could respond. My hands were shaking, but my head was high. Eleanor would have been proud. The hours between the funeral and the will reading crawled by with agonizing slowness. I returned to the mansion and busied myself cleaning up from the post-funeral reception, listening to the Hartwells hold court in the living room with distant relatives and family friends. Through the doorway, I could hear Richard's performance. Yes, Mother lived a full life. So grateful for the time we had. Of course, we'll honor her legacy. What he meant was, I'm about to be rich, can't wait to sell this place, finally getting what I deserve. Lily was already planning a trip to Europe with Grandma's money. Vanessa was on her phone looking at luxury condos in Manhattan. They were dividing Eleanor's estate before her body was even cold. At 1:45 p.m., a sleek black car pulled up to the mansion. A man in his 60s emerged, Asian, gray-haired, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit. He carried a leather briefcase that looked like it cost more than my car. This had to be James Chen, Eleanor's attorney. I met him at the door. "Ms. Madison Park?" he asked, using my legal name, the generic surname assigned by the state when I went into foster care. "Yes. Call me Maddie." His face broke into a warm smile. "Eleanor talked about you constantly. I'm so sorry for your loss. I know how much she loved you." Tears pricked my eyes. "Thank you." "Are you ready for this?" he asked quietly. "It's going to get intense." "I'm ready." He squeezed my shoulder. "She was so proud of you. Remember that, no matter what happens in the next hour." The library was Eleanor's favorite room. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather chairs, a massive oak desk, and windows overlooking the gardens. Richard had already positioned himself behind the desk like he owned the place, which I suppose he assumed he did now. Vanessa and Lily flanked him on a leather sofa, both looking smug and bored. A few distant cousins and Eleanor's sister Margaret, a brittle woman in her 90s, occupied the remaining chairs. I stood by the doorway, uncertain where I belonged. "Sit here," James Chen said, gesturing to a chair directly opposite Richard at the desk. Prime position. Richard's face flushed. "That's a family seat." "Yes," James said simply, placing his briefcase on the desk. The implication hung in the air. Richard looked confused. Vanessa looked annoyed. Lily didn't look up from her phone. James Chen opened his briefcase with deliberate ceremony and pulled out a thick document bound in blue legal covers. "Thank you all for gathering," he began. "I am James Chen, senior partner at Chen & Associates, and I've served as Eleanor Hartwell's personal attorney for 32 years. This is the last will and testament of Eleanor Margaret Hartwell, revised and finalized on August 3rd of this year. 3 months ago, right after Eleanor confirmed my identity through DNA testing. Before I begin," James Chen continued, "I need to address the primary beneficiary. Mrs. Hartwell was very specific about the reading order and wanted certain truths revealed as context for her decisions." "Just read the damned thing," Richard snapped. "We all know what it says. The estate comes to me as her only child with provisions for Lily and Vanessa. Mother and I discussed this years ago." James Chen looked at Richard with something resembling pity. "Mr. Hartwell, your mother left you a provision, yes, but you are not her only child. You never were." "What the hell are you talking about?" Richard demanded. James Chen pulled out a folder and extracted several documents: birth certificates, DNA test results, medical records. On April 17, 1995, Eleanor Hartwell gave birth to a daughter named Madison Eleanor Hartwell at St. Catherine's Hospital in Geneva, Switzerland. The child was placed for adoption due to family pressure and social circumstances. The adoption was closed and sealed. He turned to look directly at me. 2 years ago, through DNA matching and private investigation, Eleanor located her daughter. That daughter is Maddie Park, who has been employed in this household for the past 10 years. You could have heard a pin drop. Richard's face went from red to purple. That's insane. This is fraud. She's conning you all. My mother never— DNA evidence confirms it, James said calmly, sliding the test results across the desk. Madison Park is Eleanor Hartwell's biological daughter, your half-sister. Vanessa's face had gone sheet white. Lily finally looked up from her phone, eyes wide. Margaret, Eleanor's sister, began to laugh, a dry, crackling sound. I knew it. I always knew Eleanor had another baby. She disappeared for 8 months, claimed she was at a spa. None of us believed it. James Chen cleared his throat and opened the will. Now, if I may proceed with the reading, I, Eleanor Margaret Hartwell, being of sound mind and body— His voice rang—
To my son, Richard Thomas Hartwell, I leave the sum of $100,000 and my personal collection of first edition books in hopes that he might finally read something and develop empathy. Richard shot to his feet. 100,000? The estate is worth over 40 million. To my granddaughter, Lily Hartwell, I leave $50,000 for educational purposes, with the hope she learns the value of hard work and kindness. Lily's jaw dropped. To my daughter-in-law, Vanessa Hartwell, I leave my costume jewelry and $25,000, which is approximately what she's worth. Vanessa made a strangled sound. James Chen paused, letting the shock settle, then looked directly at me. To my beloved daughter, Madison Eleanor Hartwell Park. My heart stopped. I leave the entirety of my estate. This includes the Hartwell Mansion and all its contents, the family trust, valued at $38 million, all investment portfolios, properties in Manhattan and the Hamptons, and all personal effects. She is to have complete and irrevocable ownership with no contestation allowed per the— That's the only word for what happened in the seconds after James Chen finished reading. Richard lunged across the desk, his face contorted with rage. This is fraud! I'll sue! I'll contest this! That gold-digging little— Mr. Hartwell, sit down, James said sharply, his calm demeanor cracking for the first time. If you threaten Miss Park again, I'll have security remove you from this property, which, I remind you, is now legally hers. Security? This is my house, my mother's house. Was your mother's house, James corrected. It's now your sister's house. And if you'll allow me to finish, you'll understand why Eleanor made these decisions. Vanessa was hyperventilating into her handkerchief. Lily stared at me with pure venom. Margaret, the old aunt, looked thoroughly entertained. I sat frozen, my mind unable to process the words I'd just heard. $38 million. The mansion. Everything. There's more, James continued, pulling out another document. Eleanor left a letter to be read aloud. She wanted everyone to understand her reasoning. I don't give a damn about her reasoning, Richard shouted. You should, James said coldly, because she documented every instance of your cruelty toward Madi over the past 10 years. Every insult, every humiliation, every time you treated her as less than human while she was working in your mother's home. Eleanor kept detailed journals. He began to read,
and Eleanor's voice seemed to fill the room through her words. To my son Richard, I have failed you as a mother. I raised you with privilege, but without compassion, with wealth, but without character. For that, I apologize, but I will not apologize for my final act. For 10 years, I watched you treat your sister like she was invisible, like she was nothing. You walked past her in hallways without acknowledgement. You let your wife berate her for imaginary infractions. You allowed your daughter to torment her for entertainment. You never once asked her name, her real name. You called her the maid, or the help, or simply snapped your fingers when you wanted something. You treated a human being, your own sister, with less respect than you'd give a dog. Richard's face was purple now. I didn't know she was... That's precisely my point, James continued reading. You didn't know, and it didn't matter to you. You would have treated her exactly the same regardless. That is who you are, Richard, a man who measures people by their net worth and their last name. When I discovered Mamie 2 years ago, I made a terrible mistake. I should have claimed her immediately, embraced her publicly, and given her the life she deserved. Instead, I was a coward. I hid the truth because I was afraid of scandal, afraid of your reaction, afraid of disrupting our comfortable lives. So I watched. I watched you all treat my daughter with contempt, and I did nothing. That guilt will follow me to my grave. But I saw something else too. I saw Maidie's character. She worked harder than anyone I've ever known. She endured your cruelty with dignity. She cared for me in my final months with a love I didn't deserve. She never complained, never lashed out, never became bitter despite having every reason to be. She is twice the person you are, Richard, with none of the advantages. The letter went on, and with each word I felt Eleanor's love wrapping around me like armor. Maidie, my darling Madison, if you're hearing this, I'm gone, and I pray you can forgive me. I'm giving you everything because it was always yours, not because of blood, though that matters, but because you earned it through your character, your strength, your beautiful heart that refused to harden despite the world's cruelty. This mansion is your birthright. You were conceived under this roof, should have been raised in these halls. Every room you cleaned belonged to you. Every floor you scrubbed was your inheritance. Now it's official. The money isn't meant to buy your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve that. It's meant to give you choices, security, freedom, the life I stole from you 30 years ago when I gave you away. Do whatever you want with it. Sell the house, keep it, burn it down. It's yours. But know that every dollar represents my love, my regret, and my absolute faith in the woman you've become. You are my greatest achievement, Madison. Not this house, not the family name. You. I love you. I'm so sorry, and I'm so incredibly proud to be your mother. By the time James finished reading, tears were streaming down my face. Even Margaret was dabbing at her eyes. Richard looked like he'd been slapped. There's one more thing, James said quietly. He pulled out another envelope and handed it directly to me. Eleanor wanted you to have this privately, but she authorized me to explain its contents to everyone present. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a photograph I'd never seen before. Eleanor, young and radiant, with a man who had dark curly hair and green eyes like mine. They were laughing, his hand on her pregnant belly. That's Jonathan Rivera, your biological father. He was a painter. Died in a car accident in 2003. He never knew about you. Eleanor never told him about the pregnancy. She regretted that until the day she died. He slid another document across to me. Eleanor tracked down his family. You have 3 half-siblings in California. Jonathan had children with his wife before he passed. They know about you now, if you want to contact them. All the information is in there. A father. Siblings. Family beyond this toxic mansion. Eleanor also established a private trust to support Jonathan's children's education. She felt she owed them something, since she kept their father from knowing his first child. Richard had gone quiet, his bluster deflated. The reality was sinking in. He'd lost everything, not just the money, but the moral high ground, the family legacy, his own mother's respect. "This will is ironclad," James said, his tone turning businesslike. Eleanor worked with 3 separate law firms to ensure it couldn't be contested. The DNA evidence is irrefutable. Her mental competency was certified by 4 doctors. Every provision has been structured to withstand legal challenge. He looked at Richard. "You can try to fight this. You'll lose, waste whatever money you do have on legal fees, and further sully your mother's memory. Or you can accept her final wishes with whatever grace you can muster." "Grace? She humiliated me, left everything to the goddamn maid." "No," I said quietly, finding my voice for the first time. Everyone turned to look at me. "I spent 10 years invisible in this house, 10 years listening to you people complain about problems that weren't really problems while I scrubbed your toilets for minimum wage. You never saw me, never asked about my life, my dreams, whether I had enough to eat or a safe place to sleep. Eleanor saw me. She saw me when no one else did. And yes, she made mistakes, terrible mistakes. But she tried to make them right. That's more than any of you have ever done." I looked at Richard, this man who was technically my half-brother, but felt like a stranger. "I'm not the villain here. Your cruelty made—"
The weeks following the will reading were a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and photographers camped outside the mansion gates. Richard tried to contest the will, just like James predicted. He hired 3 different law firms, each one more expensive than the last. He claimed Eleanor had been coerced, mentally incompetent, manipulated by a con artist. Every claim was systematically destroyed. The DNA evidence was irrefutable. I was Eleanor's daughter, verified by 2 independent laboratories. The medical records documented her perfect mental clarity right up until her final days. The journals she'd kept showed meticulous documentation of her decision-making process. And then there were the letters. 29 letters for every birthday she'd missed. Each one a window into a mother's broken heart, her desperate search, her overwhelming love. James submitted them as evidence of Eleanor's long-standing relationship with me, even before I knew the truth. The judge took one look at the evidence and dismissed Richard's case with prejudice. He even ordered Richard to pay my legal fees. That was 2 months ago. Now, I stood in Eleanor's bedroom, my bedroom, watching the sunrise paint the gardens gold. The same gardens I'd once been forbidden to walk through. Now, every flower, every stone pathway, every perfectly manicured hedge was mine. It still didn't feel real. The mansion was quiet. Richard, Vanessa, and Lily had moved out within a week of the final court ruling, taking only their personal belongings. Vanessa had tried to sneak out several antiques. The security cameras I had installed caught everything. The police made her return them. I'd expected to feel triumphant, vindicated. Instead, I mostly felt sad. Sad for the years Eleanor and I lost. Sad for the mother who died with so much regret. Sad even for Richard, a man so consumed by greed and entitlement that he destroyed his relationship with his own mother without even realizing it. But sadness wasn't the only thing I felt. I also felt hope. Last week, I'd contacted Jonathan Rivera's family in California, my half-siblings, Carmen, Miguel, and Sophia. We'd video chatted for 3 hours, crying and laughing and sharing stories about our father. They welcomed me without hesitation, inviting me to visit for Thanksgiving. "Dad would have loved you," Carmen said, tears streaming down her face. "He always wanted a big family." I was flying out next month. A real family, finally. I'd also started making changes to the mansion. The first thing I did was convert Eleanor's suite into a scholarship foundation office. The Eleanor Hartwell Foundation for Foster Youth would provide college tuition
housing assistance, and mentorship for kids aging out of the system, kids like I had been. I'd already hired a staff of 5, including a director who'd grown up in foster care herself. We'd award our first scholarships next semester. The rest of the mansion, I was still deciding. Part of me wanted to sell it, take the money and never look back. But another part, the part that had scrubbed these floors and dusted these chandeliers and slowly fallen in love with the old house despite everything, wanted to stay. Maybe I'd turn some of it into a museum, maybe transitional housing for young people. Maybe I'd just live here and fill it with people who actually cared about each other. I had time to decide. I had money, security, choices. Everything Eleanor wanted to give me. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. "Miss Park?" It was James Chen. Over the past months, he'd become not just my attorney, but a friend. "There's someone here to see you." I followed him downstairs to the foyer, where a woman in her 60s waited nervously. She wore a simple dress and carried a worn purse, her hands twisting the strap anxiously. "Maddie?" she said, her voice trembling. "I'm Carol Henderson. I was your foster mother. You lived with me when you were 14 for about 8 months?" My heart clenched. Carol. I remember her. One of the good ones. The only foster home where I'd felt safe until her husband lost his job and they couldn't afford to keep me anymore. "Carol," I breathed, crossing the room to hug her. She held me tight, crying. "I saw you on the news, the story about Eleanor Hartwell's daughter. I couldn't believe it was you, my sweet Maddie. I'm so sorry we couldn't keep you. I wanted to. I wanted to adopt you, but we just couldn't afford." "I know," I said, pulling back to look at her. "I never blamed you. You were kind to me when nobody else was. That mattered more than you'll ever know. I just wanted you to know that I always wondered what happened to you, always hoped you were okay. And now look at you." She gestured around the mansion, tears still flowing. "You made it. You really made it." "We made it," I corrected.
We talked for 2 hours. I learned she was struggling with medical bills from her husband's cancer treatment. Before she left, I wrote her a check that would cover everything, plus enough to retire comfortably. "Maddie, I can't accept." "You can and you will," I said firmly. "You gave me a home when I needed one. Now let me return the favor." As I watched her drive away, tears streaming down her face, I finally understood what Eleanor had been trying to teach me. Money isn't just about security or luxury or revenge. It's about power. The power to help, to heal, to change lives the way mine had been changed. I was Eleanor's daughter, not just by blood, but by choice. And I was going to use every dollar, every opportunity, every advantage she'd given me to make sure no kid felt invisible ever again. The mansion wasn't just mine. It was a promise, a second chance, a new beginning. I walked back through the foyer, running my hand along the banister I'd polished 1,000 times. But this time, I wasn't the help. I was home. So that's my story. From invisible maid to the daughter who inherited everything. From scrubbing floors to owning the mansion. From nobody to somebody who finally belonged. If this story touched you, if you've ever felt invisible or overlooked, if you believe in second chances and justice, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear that their story isn't over yet, that they matter, that they're seen. And subscribe to this channel because we share stories that prove no matter where you start, you can change your ending. Your current chapter doesn't define your final page. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever felt invisible? Have you ever discovered a truth that changed everything? I read every single comment, and your stories matter to me. Remember, you are not defined by how others treat you.
You are defined by how you rise when they try to keep you down. From one invisible person who became impossible to ignore